So there I was, sitting across from my son-in-law in his fancy corner office, looking at his company logo on the big screen behind him. And I'm thinking, I literally built this, like the entire foundation, 20 years ago, and he has no idea. Let me take you back because you need to understand who I was before I became, well, this quiet guy nobody really notices. I was different back then, not showing off or anything, that was never my style. But I was hungry, you know? I mean hungry. The kind of hungry where you don't sleep because you're too excited about what you're building, where you forget to eat lunch because you're too focused on solving a problem in your code. I built my first company from scratch, started it alone in a garage that wasn't even properly heated. Sounds like every startup story, right? But I'm telling you this because it matters. This wasn't some trendy thing I did because I read about it online. There was no internet back then, not really. No YouTube tutorials, no online courses, no communities of entrepreneurs cheering you on. It was just me. My hands were frozen most mornings, typing on this ancient keyboard with my coat still on. I had this old space heater that probably violated about 17 different safety codes. And I'd sit there with my fingers going numb, just coding, building, creating systems from nothing. My father thought I was insane. He'd come by the garage sometimes and just shake his head. "You're going to destroy your eyes," he'd say. "You're going to hurt your back. Get a real job." He meant well, but he didn't understand. This wasn't a job. This was something I had to do. I didn't even take weekends off. I remember my mother actually forcing me to come to family dinners on Sundays, and I'd be sitting there at the table thinking about code, about database structures, about how to scale something that hadn't even started yet. That obsession, that's what built the foundation. The business grew, though. I mean, it really grew. It wasn't overnight or anything. It was slow at first. The first client was my friend's cousin who needed a system to manage his retail shop. I built it in like 2 weeks, charged him almost nothing because I just wanted the experience. And that client brought another client. And that one brought 2 more. I poured everything into it. My time, my money, my sleep, all of it. Years went by and I went from that garage to real offices, employees, servers running 24 hours a day. We created systems, built an architecture that was actually pretty revolutionary for that time. And I'm not just saying this, we won industry awards. Tech magazines wrote about us. Other companies tried to copy our approach. We developed this unique way of structuring databases. Most companies at that time were doing it one way, the conventional way. But I saw a flaw in that approach. I saw it could be better, faster, more scalable. So I built something different. It took me probably 6 months of non-stop work, testing, failing, rebuilding, failing again, until I got it right. When we finally implemented it, it changed everything. Our platform could handle 10 times the load that competitors' platforms could handle. Clients noticed. They came to us specifically because of that technology. By the time I sold it, we were doing something nobody else was doing. I made good money, really good money. We're talking life-changing money. Money where you don't have to worry ever again. Money where you can do literally whatever you want for the rest of your life. But here's the thing about money. Once you have enough to not worry, more money doesn't really change anything in your life. It just sits there, in bank accounts, in investments. It doesn't make you happier. It doesn't fix anything that's broken inside you. I need to tell you about my wife before I continue, because she's the reason everything else happened. I met her at a tech conference. I wasn't even supposed to be at that conference. I'd planned to skip it because I had work to do. But one of my employees basically forced me. "You work too much," he said. "You need to network. You need to see other people. You're becoming a ghost." So I went. And I saw her in the crowd. She was standing near the coffee station, listening to some guy talk about his startup. And she looked bored out of her mind. Genuinely painfully bored. She kept glancing at her watch like she was calculating how much longer she'd have to pretend to care. I walked over and said something stupid like, "This is boring, isn't it?" And instead of being offended, she laughed. This real, genuine laugh that made everyone around us turn and look. "Oh, thank God," she said. I thought I was the only one who realized this guy is talking absolute nonsense. We ended up skipping the rest of the conference and just talking. We went to a coffee shop, then dinner. Then we closed down a restaurant because the staff literally had to ask us to leave so they could clean up. She wasn't in tech. She was a teacher, actually, middle school English, and she didn't care at all about my company or my success or any of that. She cared about whether I was a good person, whether I was kind, whether I made her laugh. I remember telling her about the business and all the stress that came with it, and she just listened. And then she said, "That sounds exhausting. Why do you do it?" And honestly, in that moment, I didn't have a good answer. I think I said something about wanting to build something that mattered. And she nodded and said, "Okay, but does it matter more than sleep? Does it matter more than peace?" That question haunted me for years. We got married about a year later. And I have to be honest, I was still obsessed with work. It didn't stop. If anything, it got worse because now I was supporting her, and I felt this responsibility to make sure our future was secure. She supported me, though. She really did. She'd wait up for me when I came home late. She'd have dinner ready. She'd listen to me complain about clients or problems with code. And never once did she make me feel bad about the time I spent working. But I could see it in her eyes sometimes. This sadness, like she was watching me choose something else over her. I remember one night specifically. It was about 3 years into our marriage. I was sitting at my home office, and yes, even at home I had an office. I was that person. And she came in around midnight. "Come to bed," she said. "Just one more hour," I told her. "I'm almost finished with this." She didn't say anything. She just stood there for a moment. And then she left, and I kept working, because what else would I do? The next morning my daughter was born. I wasn't there. I was in the office. My wife had been in labor for hours and hadn't told me because she knew I was in the middle of something important. One of my employees called and said, "Your wife is at the hospital. You should probably come." I've never driven so fast in my life. When I got there, they were putting my daughter in my wife's arms. And I froze. I was holding this tiny human, my daughter, and I realized in that moment that I'd missed something irreplaceable. I'd missed the entire birth of my child because I was working. My wife didn't say anything about it. She just looked at me with my daughter in her arms and smiled. But I saw something in her eyes. I saw her wondering if this was going to be my life. If I was going to miss everything. Things changed after that. Not immediately, but gradually. I couldn't work the same way anymore. I couldn't stay at the office until midnight when I had a daughter at home who needed me. I remember my first week back after paternity leave. Yeah, I took paternity leave, which was weird back then. I was sitting at work and I got a call from my wife. My daughter was crying and nothing was helping. My wife sounded exhausted. I left work. I literally just left in the middle of a meeting. My boss was confused. "Everything okay?" he asked. And I said, "My daughter is crying and my wife needs help." And I left. I drove home and my wife handed me the baby and she just cried. My wife, I mean, not the baby, though the baby was also crying. But my wife just broke down and said, "I can't do this alone. I can't take care of her all day and then be alone all night because you're always working." And that was my wake-up call. I made a decision that day. I was going to be present. Not just physically present, actually present. I was going to be the kind of father my own father couldn't be because he was too busy working. So I changed. I started leaving work at reasonable times. I started eating dinner with my family. I started reading bedtime stories. And yeah, the company still grew, but it grew differently. I became a manager instead of just a builder. I hired better people. I trusted them. I stopped trying to do everything myself. My daughter grew up. She was smart like her mother. She had her kindness and her gentleness, but also this sharp, curious mind. She'd ask me questions about everything. Why is the sky blue? How does electricity work? Why do people get sick? I loved those conversations. I loved watching her understand the world. And my wife, God, I loved that woman so much. She became softer when I was more present. She smiled more. She was happy. Then, about 15 years into our marriage, she got sick. It started small. Just tiredness. She'd come home from school and immediately lie down. I didn't think much of it at first. Teaching is exhausting, especially teaching middle school, where kids are chaotic and don't listen, and you're constantly trying to keep control of your classroom. But then she started losing weight, and she'd have these coughing fits that would come out of nowhere. And I was like, "You should go to the doctor." She kept putting it off. "It's just a cold," she'd say. "It'll pass." But it didn't pass. When she finally went to the doctor, it was stage 3. I remember sitting in that doctor's office and just nothing made sense. How does someone just have stage 3 cancer? How does that happen? I kept asking the doctor to repeat himself because I couldn't understand what he was saying. The words were English, but they weren't connecting in my brain. "How long?" I asked. "If we do treatment, maybe 2 years, the doctor said. Could be more, could be less. Depends on how she responds. 2 years. That's all we had. I took a leave of absence from work that day. I told my board, "I'm done. I'm stepping back. I'm going to be with my wife." They tried to convince me otherwise. "You can take some time, come back," they said. But I knew I wasn't coming back. Not the same way. Not ever. My wife did treatment. Chemotherapy, radiation, the whole thing. It was brutal. She'd go through these sessions and come home and just be destroyed. Sick, exhausted, losing her hair. And I was there for every second of it. I held her hair when she got sick. I held her hand when she couldn't handle the pain. I slept in the hospital chair next to her bed. And you know what? Those were some of the best days of my life. I know that sounds insane, but they were. Because everything unnecessary fell away. All the work stress, all the business concerns, all the ego and the achievement and the proving myself to the world. It all just disappeared. What mattered was sitting with her, talking to her, making her laugh when I could. My daughter was a teenager by then, and she watched me take care of her mother. She watched what real love looked like, not in some romantic movie way, but in the hardest, most exhausting way possible. And my wife fought. God, she fought so hard. She went through treatment after treatment. She had good days and bad days. On the good days, she'd joke about it. "Maybe I'll beat this thing," she'd say. And I'd believe her, but deep down, I think I knew. She made it 2 years and 4 months. So technically, she lasted longer than they predicted, but also not by much. By the end, she was in our home, in our bedroom, in a hospice bed, and I was there, all the time. I'd wake up next to her. Well, I wouldn't really sleep. I'd just lay there and listen to her breathing, making sure she was still breathing, and I'd think about how unfair this all was. She was 47 years old. She was a good person. She was kind and funny and smart, and she didn't deserve this. But life doesn't care about what's fair. The last conversation we had, she grabbed my hand. Really gripped it, even though she was so weak she could barely hold anything. "Promise me," she said. "Promise me you won't disappear into work again. Promise me you'll be there for her." Her meant our daughter. "I promise," I said, and she closed her eyes. She died 3 hours later. I was holding her hand the entire time. The next part is kind of a blur, honestly. Funeral arrangements, family coming over, people saying they're sorry, all of that. I went through it like I was in a dream. But I remember looking at my daughter. She was a young woman now, almost a woman really, maybe 19 or 20. And I saw that she was destroyed. And I realized that I was all she had left. And I meant what I'd promised. I was going to be there. So I made another decision. I sold the company, not because I needed the money, I already had money, but because I needed to have the freedom to just be, to be a father. To be present, the sale went through pretty quickly. Some bigger tech company wanted to acquire the platform and the technology. They offered a price that was honestly more than I expected. And just like that, I was out. I took the money and I invested it conservatively. Enough so that I'd never have to work again. Enough so that my daughter would be taken care of. Enough so that I could just live, and that's what I did. For about 5 years I just lived. I spent time with my daughter. I took her to movies. We'd go for drives. We'd talk about life and boys and school and everything. I was quiet during those years. I didn't tell people about my past. If they asked what I did for work, I'd just say I was semi-retired. I wasn't showing off. I wasn't trying to be impressive. I was just existing. And honestly, it was the most peaceful I'd ever felt. My daughter met him at university. She was studying business administration, and he was in her program. He was charismatic, sure. The kind of guy who walks into a room and suddenly everyone's interested in what he has to say. She brought him home for dinner one night, and I could see immediately that she was smitten. The way she looked at him, the way she laughed at his jokes a little too hard. He was polite to me. "Nice to meet you, sir," he said. He called me sir, but there was this undertone of, I don't know, dismissiveness, like he was being nice because he had to be, because my daughter was there. But he didn't actually see me as someone worth respecting. I didn't say anything about it to my daughter. It wasn't my place. She's an adult. She makes her own choices. And maybe I was reading it wrong. But I wasn't reading it wrong. Over the next couple of years, they got serious. He'd come over more often. And every time he'd talk about his business plans, his vision, his ideas. And he'd look at me sometimes with this expression like I was some relic. Like I belonged in a museum, not in this modern world. One time we were having dinner and he was talking about some tech thing, and I casually mentioned something about database architecture that was relevant to what he was saying. Just shared something I knew about the topic. He smiled, this patronizing smile, and said, "Yeah, that's how it used to be done. But things are different now. The approach is more elegant now," and I just nodded, because what was I going to do? Have an argument about technology with my daughter's boyfriend? That wasn't who I was anymore, but it bothered me. It really bothered me. Not because he was wrong, but because he didn't even consider that I might know what I was talking about. Then came that dinner I told you about. We were all sitting around the table. My daughter had cooked. She got my wife's talent for cooking, actually, and we were having a nice evening. And then he decides to give me this lecture about how business has evolved. You know what, Baba? He called me Baba, which was his attempt at being close to me, I think. These business things, they're different now. The world is different. The technology is different. Your time, no offense, but it was simpler back then. This is real complexity. And everyone at the table just kind of froze for a second. My daughter looked uncomfortable, like she wanted to say something but didn't know what. And me? I just smiled. I smiled and I nodded, and I said, "You're probably right. Times have changed, but inside something shifted. Not anger exactly, more like clarity. This guy was always going to see me as someone less than, someone from another era, someone who couldn't understand the modern world, and I was always going to let him think that, because that was easier than confronting it." 2 weeks later, he calls me. Says he wants to show me his office, his company. He's excited about it. "I want you to see what I'm building," he says. "I think you'd appreciate it." I almost declined. Part of me wanted to just avoid the whole thing. But then I thought about my daughter. If she's going to be with this guy, maybe I should support it. Maybe I should try to understand his world instead of judging it from the outside. So I said yes, the office is nice. That's the first thing I notice. Clean, modern, good energy. He's got a team of maybe 15 people working there. Desks arranged in an open layout. People on calls, typing, looking busy and important. He walks me through it all, explaining everything like he's teaching a kindergartner how the universe works. "This is our operations center," he says. "This is where we manage client relationships. Over here is our tech team. They're building out the new features for next quarter." I'm walking behind him, listening, trying to engage. And he's so proud. You can see it in the way he stands a little taller, the way he speaks a little louder. This is his kingdom. We get to his presentation room. This is where the magic happens, apparently. There's a big screen, professional lighting, the whole setup. He pulls up his main presentation, his company slide deck, and there's his logo, his vision statement, his company structure, and I see it. I see it. The logo isn't exactly the same as mine. That would be too obvious. But the design language is identical. The geometric patterns, the color scheme, the way the letters integrate with the design, It's the same, but the logo is just the beginning. I keep looking and my stomach just drops. The company structure, the exact hierarchy I designed 20 years ago. The way departments relate to each other, the flow of information, the reporting structures. It's identical. And then I see the system architecture description, and my heart actually stops. Because I know these diagrams. I created these diagrams. I spent months designing these systems. The database structure, the way data flows through the system, the scalability architecture, the security protocols. I designed all of it, every single thing. It's like looking at my life's work being described to me as someone else's work. I must have gone pale because he notices. "You okay?" he asks. "You look shocked." "Shocked?" Yeah, that's one word for it. I don't say anything at first. I'm just standing there looking at those diagrams. At my diagrams, described in his presentation, on his company slide, and he's waiting for me to say something. He's proud. He's showing off. He's expecting me to be impressed. "These systems," I say slowly. "Tell me about these." He gets even more excited. Now he thinks I'm genuinely interested in his tech. He starts explaining how he developed the architecture, how he thought through the scaling problems, how he solved the security challenges, and he's describing my solutions, my approach, my entire methodology. He's not lying about knowing them. Clearly he does. He's implementing them correctly. He thinks he came up with them. I realize in that moment that my company was sold to a larger tech firm. And apparently this company acquired the infrastructure, probably bought it as a packaged solution or licensed it. And then this guy built his entire business on top of it. He doesn't know it's mine. He probably doesn't even know who originally built it. It's just technology, just systems, just code that exists. It's impressive, I finally say, and I mean it. He's done a good job building a company on top of a strong foundation. He's kept the core architecture intact while adding his own features and his own business model on top of it. But he doesn't know. He doesn't know that the strongest, most elegant part of his business, the part that makes him better than his competitors, was built by me 20 years ago. We finish the tour and he drives me home. The whole way I'm thinking about this. I could say something. I could pull out my old documents, and I have them. They're in a box in my basement, and I could prove what I built. I could show him the original code, the original architecture, the original designs. I could make him feel small. I could make him feel stupid. I could humiliate him in front of his team. I could do all of that. But what good would it do? See, here's the thing that people don't understand about having had success. Once you've proven yourself, you don't need to prove it again. You don't need to make other people feel small to feel big yourself. That's the trap I could have fallen into. That's what arrogant people do. They prove their worth by diminishing others. But I'm not that person. And more importantly, I couldn't do that to my daughter. Because the second I expose him, the second I make this into some big confrontation, I'm also making it her problem. I'm putting her in the middle of something that's going to hurt her, probably destroy her relationship, and for what? So I can feel validated? That's selfish, and I promised my wife I wouldn't be selfish anymore. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay in bed thinking about all of this. I thought about going to lawyers. I thought about legal action. I thought about just forgetting it and pretending it never happened. But mostly I thought about my daughter. She's proud of him. She loves him. She believes in him, and he is actually building something. He's actually a good businessman. He's taking what I built and making it work in this modern context. He's making it successful. He's creating jobs. He's solving problems for customers. That's not nothing. But the question that kept me awake was, does she deserve to know the truth? And I think the answer was yes. Not to hurt him or to prove myself, but because she deserves to know where she comes from. She deserves to know that her father built something so solid, so well architected, that it's still being used successfully 20 years later. That's actually something to be proud of. So I made a decision. I was going to tell him. Not in anger, not in a confrontational way where I'm trying to one-up him or make him feel bad. I was just going to show him the truth and let him process it. I found my old identity card. This thing is ancient. The photo is terrible. I look so young. Probably 30 years old, hair I don't have anymore. This expression of pure ambition on my face. But there it is. In writing, founder and CEO of the exact company whose infrastructure he's running. I held that card for a long time. I thought about what this conversation was going to do. I thought about whether I was making a mistake. I thought about whether this was the right way to handle it. And then I thought about what my wife would have wanted. She would have wanted honesty. She would have wanted me to be true to myself. She would have wanted our daughter to know the truth. So I called him. I asked him to meet me without my daughter. Just the two of us. He seemed confused but agreed. We met at this quiet coffee place. Nothing fancy. Just a cafe where we could sit and talk privately. I didn't make it dramatic. No grand speech. No big reveal. I just started talking. I told him about my wife. About how I'd built something from nothing. How I'd poured my life into creating those systems he was now using. His face was confused at first. He was probably thinking, why is my father-in-law telling me this? And then I pulled out the card. I put it on the table between us. This is from 20 years ago, I said. Founder and CEO. He looked at it. And he looked at me, and then back at the card. This is you? He asked quietly. Yeah, I said. This is me. He picked up the card. His hands were shaking a little. And I could see the moment it clicked. The moment he understood. My company it's built on your company, he said. Not built on it exactly. The entire foundation is mine. The systems, the architecture, the technology, everything. You didn't change much, actually. You took it and kept running it under a different name. He looked sick. He really did look physically unwell. His face went pale and I thought he might actually get sick right there in the coffee shop. I didn't know. He kept saying, I didn't know. I thought I didn't know any of this. I know you didn't know, I told him. That's the point. You didn't know who I was. You didn't bother to ask. Your father-in-law wasn't someone interesting to you because I wasn't talking about my achievements. I wasn't marketing myself. I was just being quiet. Then I said something that I think really made him understand. Sometimes quiet people have the loudest pass. He just sat there, staring at that old card like it was going to explain everything. Look, I continued, I'm not telling you this to hurt you. I'm not doing this to make you feel bad or to prove something. I'm telling you this because you need to understand something. He looked up at me. Respect, I said, isn't something you earn by talking louder than everyone else. It's not something you earn by showing off how much you know or how confident you are. Real respect, the kind that lasts. It's earned by understanding where you come from, by recognizing the people who made it possible for you to stand where you're standing. Does she know? He asked. Your daughter. Does she know? No, I said. But you're going to tell her, together. You're going to explain how you didn't know your entire company was built on the infrastructure I created. And then you're both going to come to dinner, and we're going to talk like a real family. Not with you looking down at me like I'm from some ancient era, but with actual understanding, with some actual humility. He nodded. He wasn't arguing or defensive. He was just processing. I don't know what to say, he said finally. You don't have to say anything right now, I told him. You just have to think about it. And then you have to tell her. When he told my daughter, it was a whole thing. Like I said, she was shocked first. Confused. Angry, actually. Not at me, but at him, at the situation, at the fact that he hadn't even researched the company he was running. She called me that night. Her voice was shaky. Why didn't you tell me? She asked. Why didn't you tell me about all of this? Because it wasn't my story to tell, I said. And more importantly, because I wasn't trying to prove something. I never have been. But Dad, you built that company. You literally created everything he's using. Yes, I said. But I also let go of it. I sold it. I moved on. And I'm okay with that. How are you okay with that? She demanded. Because, I said, I realized a long time ago that holding on to what you've built is just another form of ego. My mother died and I promised to be present. I promised to be with you. And I did. That was worth more than any company. She didn't say anything for a while. He feels terrible, she finally said. I know he does, I replied. Good, he should. But this is also an opportunity for him to be better, to be smarter, to not assume things about people just because they're quiet. They both came to dinner the following Saturday. The atmosphere was strange at first. Everyone was a little tense. We made small talk about weather and traffic and stupid things that don't matter. But then my son-in-law, he said something. I researched you, he said. After finding out, I looked at the original company. I read about the technology you developed. I read articles about you. I watched interviews you did. I hadn't realized those interviews still existed. I thought they'd been forgotten by now. You were ahead of your time, he continued. Like you didn't just build something that worked. You solved problems that other people didn't even know existed yet. You anticipated where the market was going. Thank you, I said. I'm sorry, he said, for not respecting you, for making assumptions about you, for not caring enough to know who you actually were. And I accepted that, because that's what you do. You accept genuine apologies. You move forward, but my daughter, she was looking at me differently now. She was seeing her father, but she was also seeing this other version of me. This successful entrepreneur, this visionary, this person who'd built something that lasted. Tell me about it, she said. Tell me about building the company. I want to know. So I did. I told her about starting in that garage, about the obsession, about the nights I couldn't sleep because I was too excited about a problem I was trying to solve. I told her about meeting her mother at that conference and how she'd asked me, does it matter more than peace? And how that question changed everything. I told her about being there when she was born and realizing that I'd missed something irreplaceable, and about choosing to be present after that. I told her about her mother's illness and how those were some of the best days of my life because everything unnecessary fell away. And I told her about selling the company not because I needed the money, but because I needed to choose her. Because I needed to choose peace. Because I needed to choose to be her father. She cried while I was talking. Not sad tears exactly. More like understanding tears. Like pieces were falling into place. My son-in-law was quiet the whole time, just listening. When I finished, he said, I don't have any of that. I don't have that peace. I'm always stressed about the business. I'm always thinking about the next quarter, the next goal. Yeah, I said. I was like that too. It's not worth it. But isn't that how you build something? He asked. You can build something and have peace, I told him. But you have to choose what matters. You have to let go of the idea that everything depends on you. You have to trust other people. You have to make time for the people you love. Things changed after that dinner. He didn't suddenly become a different person or anything, but he became someone willing to listen, someone willing to learn. He actually asked me for advice, real advice, about scaling the company, about managing teams, about making decisions. And I helped him. Why wouldn't I? He married my daughter. That makes him family. My daughter started coming to me more too. She'd ask about business, but also about life, about relationships, about what matters. And he, my son-in-law, he gave me credit publicly. He told his team that the core architecture of the platform was built by me, that he'd inherited it when he took over the business. And instead of that making him look bad, it actually made him look better. People respected the fact that he was honest about it. People respected the fact that he gave credit where it was due. His company actually grew faster after that, because now the story was cooler. Young entrepreneur takes over legacy tech platform and modernizes it. That's a better story than, I built this from scratch. He learned something that a lot of people never learn. Admitting what you don't know, admitting where you came from, Admitting that you're standing on someone else's shoulders, that's not weakness. That's actually power. Here's what I want you to understand from all of this, because I think this matters more than anything else. The world respects noise. The world respects people who talk about their achievements, who market themselves, who make sure everyone knows how great they are. You scroll through social media and you see these people constantly telling you about their success. I built a 6-figure business in 6 months. I made $1 million. I did this, I did that. And people pay attention because the noise is loud. But real respect? That comes from something deeper. Real respect comes from knowing that you've done something that lasts. That you've built something solid enough that other people can build on top of it. That you don't need to announce yourself because you're